On the night I buried my mother, my father took me to his bed, saying it was so I wouldn't feel alone. It was the beginning of 10 years of silent terror. When I finally understood what that special affection was, it was already too late. But sometimes fate charges interest on what was taken from us. Good afternoon, my dear viewers. What a joy to be here with you again in this special corner of the internet. I'm Hannah Montgomery, 73 years old and living in Burlington, Vermont, the beautiful town that welcomed me after life took me on so many turns. Today the sky is clear, with a blue that reminds me of summer days from my childhood. I'm sitting here on my porch, with my knitting in my lap and a cup of hot tea beside me, looking at the flowers in my small garden. The dahlias are beautiful this time of year. Did you know that? Every morning when I wake up, the first thing I do is open the curtains and admire how generous nature is, even when life hasn't always been. Every day I make sure to sit in this rocking chair that my late husband August gave me almost 30 years ago. It's not one of those modern ones, no. It's one of those old ones, solid wood, that creaks a little when you rock, but it's a pleasant creak, you know? As if the chair were talking to me, telling me the stories it has witnessed. It was in this very chair that I started recording these videos for you. My granddaughter Claire had the idea. "Grandma," she told me one day, "your stories are so important, you should share them with more people." At first, I was embarrassed. Imagine, a lady my age appearing on the internet. But then I realized that maybe, just maybe, my experiences could help someone out there. And look what happened. It's been almost 2 years of sharing a little bit of my life with you. Each comment I receive is like a warm hug, you know? I cherish them all in my heart. My Claire helps me read all of them, and sometimes I even cry with emotion seeing how many beautiful people I've met because of this little cell phone. Today I want to talk about something I kept inside myself for many years. It's not an easy story to tell, but I've learned that the most difficult stories are precisely those that most need to be heard. It's about shadows from the past, about pains we carry in silence, but also about liberation. And you, my dears who are watching me now, tell me here in the comments, from what little town or city are you watching me? And at what time of day did you find this video? Is it early morning with that hot coffee, after lunch taking a little rest, or already at night preparing to sleep? I always read all the comments, and I'm so happy to know where you're from and when you take time out of your day to listen to this grandma's stories. Let me know, okay? Let's create a chain of caring. You know, my story begins many years ago, when I was still a girl with pigtails and a polka dot dress. A time when the world seemed bigger and scarier, especially when we lose those who protect us. It was a time of darkness, but it was also the beginning of a journey that brought me here, sitting in this chair, sharing pieces of my soul with you. It's not easy to go back to these moments, but as my grandmother Irene used to say, we only free ourselves from what we have the courage to face head-on. And today, my dears, I'm going to face one of the most painful parts of my life. I'll tell you about a time when hands that should protect became the source of my greatest fear. But I'll also tell you how I found strength where I thought there was only weakness. So make yourselves comfortable, grab a coffee or tea like mine, and let's travel together down this road of memories. Because some stories, even the most difficult ones, need to be told so that others don't have to be lived. I was born in Millfield, a small town on the border with Pennsylvania. It was a small place where everybody knew everybody. It was a pretty place, with those colorful little houses and the Millfield River winding alongside. My father, Ernest Montgomery, worked as a carpenter, had his own workshop in the back of our house. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered with large hands calloused from working with wood. My mother, Ida, was a seamstress, a good one. She made wedding dresses that were sought after by girls even from other towns. Our house was simple but always tidy. It had a long hallway connecting the living room to the 3 bedrooms. Mine was small, with a window overlooking the backyard. On the walls, my mother had put up flowery wallpaper that she chose herself. I loved counting the flowers while waiting for sleep to come. There was a large backyard, with a peach tree that gave fruit so sweet the smell spread throughout the whole neighborhood when they were ripe. We were a common family back then. Dad worked all day in the workshop, Mom sewed and took care of the house, and my brother Ted, 2 years older than me, and I would walk together to school in the morning. Ted was always the protector, held my hand on the cobblestone streets, and defended me when some boy picked on me. Our routine was simple and predictable. We'd wake up early, have breakfast with homemade bread and peach jam that Mom made. Then we'd go to school. At lunch, we were all together at the table. Dad insisted on this family moment. "It's at bread and table that you know a man's character," he always said. In the afternoon, we'd play in the yard or help with household chores. Ted liked to stay in the workshop with Dad, learning the trade. I preferred to stay close to Mom, watching her sew, her delicate fingers guiding the fabric under the needle of the machine. On Sunday afternoons, we'd walk to the central square. Dad would buy ice cream for us, and we'd watch the movement, the families walking, the courting couples. Mom would always wear a pretty dress on these days, usually a light blue one that Dad said matched her eyes. And they walked hand in hand like two sweethearts. In those moments, I thought we were the happiest family in the world. I had my little friends from school, Nancy and Celia. We played Ring Around the Rosie house and school. Nancy lived nearby, across the street, and sometimes slept over at our house when her parents went to some engagement in the neighboring town. We'd make little tents with sheets stretched between chairs and tell spine-tingling stories using a flashlight under our faces. Life was simple, but good. Until I was 10, my biggest worry was whether it would rain on the day of the school field trip, or if there would be a piece left of the orange cake Mom made on Saturdays. But fate has these things, of changing everything when we least expect it. It started with a cough that Mom couldn't control. At first, she said it was nothing, just a silly little cold. But soon she started losing weight, getting more tired. The sewing started taking longer. Some clients had to look for another seamstress because Mom couldn't keep up. I remember Dad getting nervous about this. "Ida, you need to go to the doctor," he'd say. But in those days, going to the doctor was almost a luxury. Only when things were really bad. And when she finally went, it was already too late. Tuberculosis, they said. In those days, there weren't the treatments of today. And Mom, always so full of life, withered before our eyes like a little flower without water. The day she left us, the sky was so blue it seemed like a provocation. How could it be so beautiful outside when inside our house there was only pain? I had just turned 11 years old. Ted was 13. Dad was like an empty shell, sitting on the edge of the bed where Mom had passed, looking at his hands as if seeking some answer in them. The funeral was simple, but the whole town showed up. Mom was loved by everyone. They formed a line to offer their condolences, and I could only think that I wanted everyone to go away, to leave me alone with my grief. Ted stayed tough, holding back tears, but I saw when he hid behind the shed and cried until he sobbed. We returned home, and the silence was like a living presence. Dad didn't say anything, but he started drinking more. He always had his drink after work, but now it was different. He'd drink until late, sometimes falling asleep right there in the living room. The workshop began receiving fewer orders because he didn't deliver on time. Money got tight, and with it, patience too. Ted tried to help as best he could. He learned to cook some basic things, took care of me when Dad was indisposed. But he was also just a boy, and soon things got even worse for us. It was a week after the funeral. I couldn't sleep in my room alone. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought I'd hear Mom's cough in the next room, and when I remembered I'd never hear it again, the tears would come. That night, it was especially difficult. The wind hit the window, making a strange noise, as if someone was scratching to get in. I got up from the bed and went to Ted's room, but he wasn't there. I later found out he had gone to sleep at our Uncle Jeremy's house to help with some farm work the next day. I stood in the dark hallway, afraid to go back to my room, but even more afraid to stay there. That's when the door to Dad's room opened. He was standing there, his silhouette cut out by the dim light of the oil lamp he kept lit. "Hannah? What is it, girl? Can't sleep?" he asked. His voice was different, slurred because of the drink. I shook my head, holding back tears. "You miss your mother, don't you?" "So do I," he said, and then made the invitation that would change everything. "Come, sleep here with your dad tonight. That way neither of us will be alone." That night, something in his look should have warned me. But I was just a girl with a heart broken by the loss of my mother. How could I know what that invitation really meant? How could I imagine that, by lying in that bed, I was entering a cage from which it would take years to escape? That first night in Dad's room was strange, but not in the way it would come to be later. He laid me in the bed that used to be theirs, Mom's and his, and he laid down on the other side, leaving a space between us. He smelled of whiskey and sweat, but also of the linseed oil he used on the wood. I stared at the ceiling, at the same place where Mom must have looked so many times. "You know, daughter," he said in the dark, "sometimes God takes what we love most to see if we still know how to love." I didn't answer. I was thinking about Mom, if she could see us from where she was, if she knew how much we were suffering without her. "Now it's just the three of us," Dad continued. "We have to take care of each other." I slept restlessly, but I slept. When I woke up, Dad had already gotten up and was in the kitchen making coffee. The smell of brewed coffee was comforting, as if a little piece of the routine from before was still there. Ted arrived from Uncle Jeremy's house and looked strangely at me when he saw me coming out of Dad's room. He didn't say anything, but I saw his eyes narrow. I thought it would be just that one night, that it was a momentary comfort for two people in mourning. But the next night, when I was preparing to sleep in my room, Dad appeared at the door. "Come, daughter," he said. "It's not good to be alone with your thoughts at your age." And so it began. One night turned into two turned into a week, and soon there was no more invitation. It was simply where I slept now. Ted continued to find it strange, but what could he say? It was our father, the man who supported us, who took care of us now that Mom was no longer there. At first, it was just lying side by side. Sometimes he cried softly, thinking I was asleep. I felt sorry for him, for his pain. But soon I realized that the drink was changing something in him. He came home later and later from Ed's store, staggering through the hallways. And in the dark of the room, his sobs of crying were transforming into something else. The first time I felt his hand on me was like a shock. I had just turned 11 years and 2 months. I pretended I was asleep, breathing slow and rhythmically, while my heart was beating so hard I thought he could hear it. They were large and rough hands, calloused from working with hard woods, hands that I once admired, seeing them create beauty from raw trunks. Now, in the dark, those same hands moved in a way I didn't completely understand, but that caused me deep discomfort, a knot in my throat, a desire to flee. "It's just a caress," he whispered, more to himself than to me. Every father gives his daughter caresses. His hot, sour whiskey breath reached me, and I curled up even more, pretending a deep sleep, while silent tears ran down my face and wet the pillow. In the following mornings, he acted normally. He prepared coffee, gave money for bread, asked about school, as if nothing had happened. And I, at first, almost believed I had dreamed, that those caresses were nightmares caused by the sadness of losing Mom. But then night would come again. "Everyone has a family secret," he told me once, while his hands traveled to places where they should never be. "This is our secret, Hannah. If you tell anyone, they'll take you and Ted away, and then what? Who will take care of you?" Fear paralyzed me. Fear of being separated from my brother, fear of going to an unknown place, fear that no one would believe me against the word of an adult respected in the community. And God forgive me, fear of hurting my own father, whom, despite everything, I still loved in some confused and painful way. Ted began to look at me differently, not with anger, but with sad confusion. He was 13, entering adolescence, beginning to understand things I still didn't fully comprehend. Once, he tried to talk to me. "Hannah," he said softly while we were alone in the yard, "why are you sleeping in Dad's room?" "It's because I'm afraid to sleep alone," I answered, my eyes fixed on the packed dirt beneath my feet. "And does he treat you well there?" His voice faltered a bit. I couldn't answer, just shrugged. Ted was silent for a long time, then said, "If he does anything that makes you sad or afraid, you tell me, okay? Promise?" I promised, but it was an empty promise. How could I tell? How to put into words something I didn't quite understand myself? The months passed and the situation got worse. The caresses became more invasive, more painful, more frightening. I developed strategies. I pretended to be sick, waited for him to drink until he fell asleep, tried to sleep in Ted's room when Dad went out at night. But there was always a night when I couldn't escape. At school, my grades began to fall. I couldn't concentrate. I was always tired. Miss Lenora noticed the change. "Hannah, is something happening at home?" she asked once after class. I shook my head, but she didn't seem convinced. "You know you can count on me, don't you? For anything." I almost told her that day, almost let it all out. But then I remembered his words. Our secret. And what would happen if I talked? So I swallowed the tears and said I was just missing my mother. Time passed differently at night. The minutes dragged on as I waited for him to fall asleep. I learned to recognize his heavy breathing when finally the alcohol overcame him. Only then could I relax a little, huddled at the edge of the bed, as far away from him as possible. I began to hate myself, to hate my body that was beginning to change, to hate the mirror that showed me a girl I no longer recognized. I began to wear baggy clothes, to hide inside them. I stopped playing with my friends, going to school parties. Any touch, even innocent, scared me. But the worst part wasn't the nights. The worst part was how it was changing the way I saw the world. When I observed other families in the square on Sundays, I kept wondering, are there also hidden secrets there? Does that father, smiling at his daughter while pushing her swing, also transform at night? It was on one of those Sunday afternoons, almost a year after it all began, that I had a kind of revelation. We were in the square, as was customary, but now it was different. Dad no longer bought ice cream for us. He was always irritated or distant. Ted barely stayed at home anymore. He spent more and more time at Uncle Jeremy's house. And I was there, sitting on a bench, observing people. I saw a father with his daughter. She must have been about my age, maybe 12 years old. He hugged her, lovingly messed up her hair, and put her on his shoulders so she could see something better that was happening on the other side of the square. And in her eyes, instead of fear, there was pure joy, complete trust. It was as if a curtain had been torn in front of me. Suddenly, I saw clearly what was happening to me wasn't normal. It wasn't affection. It wasn't a father's love. It was something else, something dirty, wrong, that was destroying me inside every night. A father's true love looked like what I was seeing now: protection, respect, shared joy. And at that moment, something changed inside me. The confusion gave way to painful certainty. Fear began to share space with another feeling: anger. A deep anger that burned slowly, like the embers in my father's workshop when he forged his metal pieces. An anger that, little by little, would transform into something even more dangerous: determination. That night, when he came back drunk and his large, calloused hands began to move in the dark, I didn't close my eyes. For the first time, I looked directly at him. He didn't notice, he was too drunk. But I noticed something. He was no longer an invincible giant in my eyes. He was just a weak man, broken by pain, seeking comfort in the worst possible way. And for the first time, I felt not just fear, I also felt pity. And the pity, mixed with anger, began to give me strength. One day, I thought, as he finally fell into the heavy sleep of drunkenness. One day this will end. I still didn't know how or when, but the seed was planted. I was only 12 years old, but at that moment, something adult and dangerous began to grow inside me, something that would wait patiently for the right moment. The next 2 years were a nightmare that seemed to have no end. The more time passed, the bolder and more careless Dad became. What used to happen only in the dark of night, protected by the secret of the room, began to happen at other times, when Ted wasn't home, in the kitchen, when I was washing dishes, in the dark hallway when I came back from the bathroom. His large and rough hand always found a way to reach me, to trap me, to hurt me. The alcohol made everything worse. It wasn't just on weekends anymore. Now he started drinking right after lunch. The orders at the carpentry shop fell even more. Customers complained about poorly finished furniture, deadlines not met. Our financial situation became critical. Sometimes there was no food on the table. Ted, then 15 years old, started working with Uncle Jeremy on the farm to bring some money home. At this time, Ted already suspected that something very wrong was happening. He observed me with a sad and helpless look. Once, he entered the room while Dad was giving me caresses, as he called it. It was a terrible moment. Dad jumped up staggering and yelled at Ted to get out. The two argued badly, and for a moment I thought they were going to hurt each other. Ted had grown, but Dad was still stronger. In the end, Ted left, slamming the door, and I heard when he also slammed the front door. He stayed away for 2 days. When he came back, he tried to convince me to go with him to Uncle Jeremy's house. "We can run away, Hannah," he said, his eyes burning with determination. "Uncle Jeremy will understand when I tell him. He can help us." But fear paralyzed me. "What if he doesn't believe us?" I asked. "What if Dad comes to get us? What if they separate us? What if—" I couldn't finish. Ted hugged me, and I felt his thin body trembling against mine. He was afraid, too. He was just a boy trying to protect his younger sister. "Then I'll save up money," he decided. "I'll work more, save everything, and when I have enough, we'll go to Philadelphia. I have a friend who went there, said there's work. I'll get you out of here, Hannah. I promise." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to so badly. But the nights continued, relentless, and with them, the caresses that made me sick inside. It was at this time that people in town started talking. Small towns have eyes in every corner, and neighbors noticed the changes. They noticed that I no longer smiled, that I always walked looking at the ground. They noticed that Dad drank more and more, that Ted always had dark circles, always working to make up for what Dad no longer did. Miss Lenora called me again after class. "Hannah," she said, gently placing her hand on my shoulder, a touch that made me instinctively shrink. "I'm very concerned about you. I know you lost your mother, that it's been difficult. But there's something else happening, isn't there? You can trust me." I almost told her everything that day. Her eyes were so kind, so sincere. But then I thought about Ted, about our plan to save money and run away. If I spoke, maybe everything would get even worse. Maybe they wouldn't even believe me. So I just cried without saying anything, and she hugged me in silence. At home, things reached the lowest point in the winter of my 13th year. Dad completely lost control. The workshop was practically abandoned. He spent his days at the store, drinking, and came home at night, beside himself. Sometimes he couldn't even reach the bedroom. He passed out in the living room. Those were the only nights I could sleep in peace. Ted, desperate, worked more and more, assuming the role of provider for the house. He was only 15 years old, but he already looked like an adult, with his thin face and always tired eyes. Our relationship became strange, tense. He wanted to protect me, but he couldn't always be present. And when he wasn't, Dad took advantage. One night, Ted came home earlier than expected. Dad was in the kitchen, pressing me against the sink. his hands going under my blouse while I cried silently. Ted saw everything. What happened next was a blur. I remember screams, furniture being knocked over. I remember Ted, my skinny 15-year-old brother, jumping on our father trying to hit him. And I remember the sound of something breaking, a bottle, and the blood. So much blood. Dad had broken a bottle of whiskey on Ted's head. My brother fell, bleeding heavily. I ran to him, screaming, but Dad pulled me by the arm so hard I thought it would break. "He tried to kill me," Dad shouted. "I'm calling the police. I'm going to have this bastard locked up." At that moment, something broke inside me. It wasn't just fear or anger. It was pure hatred. A hatred I had never felt before. "If you call the police," I said, my voice strangely calm, "I'll tell them everything you do to me. Everything." He stared at me, his eyes red and swollen, his unshaven beard, the smell of drink permeating everything. For a moment, I saw fear in his eyes. Fear of a 13-year-old girl. And that gave me a power I had never felt before. Ted needed stitches in his head. We made up a story for the doctor, that he had fallen and hit his head on the corner of the table. No one completely believed it, but no one questioned much either. That's how things worked in small towns back then. After that, Ted was never the same. Something had broken inside him too. 2 weeks later, he took his few things and left home. "I'm going to Philadelphia," he told me while packing a small bag. "I'll work, rent a room, and then I'll come get you. I promise, Hannah. I won't leave you here forever." I cried a lot that day. I begged him to take me with him. But he explained that it would be harder to get work and housing with a 13-year-old girl. "I need to establish myself first," he said. "It'll be just for a while. I promise." And so I was left alone with Dad. Without Ted's protective presence, without anyone to interfere, things got even worse. The caresses became more violent, more frequent. There was no one at home to interrupt us anymore, no one to scream to for help. I learned to disconnect during those moments, to send my mind far away while my body was trapped there. I imagined I was in the square, eating ice cream with Mom and Ted, or at the river where we used to fish in the summers before everything fell apart. I created entire worlds inside my head where I was safe, protected, loved in the right way. But reality always came back. And with it, the pain, the shame, the feeling of being completely alone in the world. Months passed without news from Ted. I began to fear that he had forgotten me, that he had moved on with his life and left me behind. Or worse, that something bad had happened to him. Philadelphia was a big and dangerous city for a boy from the countryside. Then, on a rainy afternoon, when I was coming back from school, I saw an envelope under the door. Inside was money, not much, but more than I had ever seen together, and a note. "I'm working in a factory. I have a rented room. It's not safe to come get you yet, but it will be soon. Hang in there. I love you. T." That note gave me strength to endure a few more months. I kept the money in a hiding place I made under a loose board in my old room. I began to plan my escape, calculating how much I would need for the bus ticket, how long it would take to get to Philadelphia, how I would find Ted when I got there. But fate had other plans. One night, Dad came home drunker than usual. He was furious, yelling about some job that had gone wrong, some customer who refused to pay. I tried to hide in the bathroom, but he broke down the door. "It's all your fault," he shouted, though it made no sense at all. "You and your brother, you ruined my life." What happened next was a nightmare in slow motion. He dragged me to the room, tore my clothes. His hands, those large and calloused hands that once built beautiful things, now only destroyed. They destroyed my childhood, my innocence, my future. I tried to resist. For the first time, I really fought. I scratched, kicked, tried to scream. But he was much stronger, and the alcohol seemed to make him insensitive to pain. When it finally ended, he fell into a deep sleep, snoring loudly, as if nothing had happened. I lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling, at the same place where Mom must have looked so many times. And it was then that I made my decision. I wouldn't wait any longer for Ted. I couldn't bear even one more day in that house. Somehow, this needed to end. And if no one saved me, I would have to save myself. With this thought, I fell asleep. A disturbed sleep, full of nightmares. But when I woke up the next morning, something had changed. I was no longer just a frightened girl. I was a survivor with a plan. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something like hope. The morning after that terrible night, Dad left early. He didn't even look me in the eyes during breakfast, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't destroyed another piece of me the night before. His face was swollen, his eyes red, his hands trembling as he held the cup. "I'm going to work in the workshop today," he muttered. "There's a cabinet to deliver to Mr. Boniface by the end of the week." I nodded silently. I no longer cared about his plans, about his empty promises of work that rarely materialized. I just wanted him to leave, to let me breathe for a few hours. When I heard the workshop door close, I went to my hiding place and took the money Ted had sent. I counted the bills several times. Would it be enough for a ticket to Philadelphia? And how would I find my brother in such a big city? The note had no address, no indication of where he was. Fear paralyzed me again. I looked out the window and saw Dad walking towards the store, probably to buy whiskey before starting work. His walk was already unstable, even at that hour of the morning. Suddenly, I had a terrifying certainty. He wouldn't change. Never. This would continue, night after night, until when? Until I managed to run away? Until he killed me in one of his explosions of rage? Until I killed myself to escape this hell? It was then that I heard my mother's voice, so clear as if she were beside me. "Be strong, my daughter. Do what needs to be done." It wasn't really her voice, of course. It was my mind seeking strength where it could. But that gave me a clarity I didn't have before. I couldn't wait for someone to save me. Not Ted, not Miss Lenora, not the neighbors who pretended not to see what happened in our house. I had to save myself. I spent the entire day wandering around the house, restless, thinking about what to do. Would I run away that very night? Try to reach the bus station without being seen? Take the first bus away from there? But where would I go if I couldn't find Ted in Philadelphia? While these questions were spinning in my head, my feet led me to the workshop at the back of the house. It was empty. Dad had probably gone to the store and wouldn't be back so soon. I entered slowly, breathing in the familiar smell of wood, varnish, and linseed oil. This was his kingdom, the place where he transformed from a violent drunk into a respected craftsman. The tools were scattered on the bench, hammers, chisels, saws, sandpaper, and at the back, covered by a thin layer of sawdust, the bandsaw. A large old machine that Dad had bought secondhand from a carpentry shop that closed in Hartford. His pride. The bandsaw was silent now, but I knew the noise it made when turned on. A high-pitched buzzing that became a roar when the blade cut the wood. I had seen Dad use it hundreds of times, always with care, always respecting the power of the machine. "This cuts anything, Hannah," he explained to me once, in the times when he was still a real father. "That's why you have to respect it. Never touch this when I'm not with you." I looked at the machine for a long time. Something was forming in my mind, something dark and definitive. It wasn't quite a plan yet, more like a glimpse of possibility. Frightening, but also liberating. When I returned to the house, Dad had already returned. He was in the living room, a half-empty bottle beside him, snoring on the old sofa. I looked at him and felt nothing. Not fear, not anger, not hatred. Just a cold certainty that something needed to change. That night was one of the worst. He woke up around 8, already looking for me. I tried to lock myself in the bathroom, but he broke down the door again. "Come here," he ordered, dragging me to the room. "I need my special caress. I closed my eyes as his hands, those huge and calloused hands, began their terrible ritual. But this time, instead of disconnecting completely, a part of me observed, studied, memorized each movement, each habit, each weakness, like a predator studying its prey. The next morning, I couldn't go to school. My body hurt too much. My soul was in pieces. I lay there, looking at the ceiling, while I heard Dad moving around the house until he finally left. The front door slammed, and silence returned. I got up with difficulty and went to the window. I saw when he staggered to the store, as every morning. He would return drunk, try to work a little in the workshop, drink more, and at night, everything would start again. It was then that I made my decision. It wouldn't be that night. I needed a better, safer plan. I needed to study his habits, understand exactly how the bandsaw worked, how to turn it on, how to turn it off. I needed to be sure. I spent the following week observing. I went to school, came back, did what he ordered, endured the nights. But now with a purpose. Every detail was important. I discovered that every Saturday he drank more than usual. That on Saturday afternoons, when he came back from the store, he went straight to the workshop, determined to show himself that he was still capable of working. I discovered that when he drank too much, he became clumsy, reckless with the tools. He had cut himself several times, small accidents that he hid with dirty bandages, and most importantly, I discovered that he never, ever turned off the safety key of the bandsaw. "Waste of time," he grumbled when someone mentioned the danger. "I know this machine like the back of my hand." On Saturday, I woke up with a strange calm, as if my body knew that would be the last day of fear, the last day of pain. I prepared breakfast in silence, served Dad, who already seemed half drunk even at that hour of the morning. "I'm going to work on Boniface's cabinet today," he said, more to himself than to me. "I'm going to finish it today." "Yes, Dad," I replied, my voice neutral. He looked at me in surprise. It had been a long time since I had responded, since I had reacted. Perhaps he mistook my calm for submission, for acceptance. Perhaps he thought he had finally broken me completely. He left for the store as always. I waited an hour, 2. When the clock struck 3 in the afternoon, I heard the front door. Heavy, dragging footsteps. A curse when he tripped on the carpet. Then the back door opening and closing. He had gone to the workshop. I waited another half hour. My heart was beating so hard it seemed like it would come out of my mouth. My hands were trembling, but my mind was clearer than ever. Slowly, I got up and went to the kitchen. I took a glass of water, drank slowly. Then I walked to the back door, crossed the small yard, and stopped at the entrance to the workshop. He had his back to me, leaning over the bandsaw, adjusting something. The bottle of whiskey was beside him, already half empty. The strong smell of alcohol mixed with that of freshly cut wood. His large and skillful hands, despite the drunkenness, moved with a familiarity born of decades of practice. I entered silently. He didn't hear me. The old radio was playing some country music, drowning out my steps. I approached more, observing. His hands were inside the machine now, adjusting the tension of the blade. The saw was turned off, but the safety key, the one that should always be locked when making adjustments, was in the on position, as always. The safety key was on the right side of the machine, a large red round button. Just press it for the saw to come to life. I stood there, observing his hands inside the machine. Those hands that had taken my childhood, my innocence, my peace. Those hands that only brought pain and shame. Large, rough, calloused from working with wood and stained by years of alcohol. "Hannah?" His voice surprised me. He had turned around and seen me standing there. "What are you doing here, girl? I told you not to enter the workshop when I'm working." I didn't answer. I just took a step to the side, getting closer to the safety key. "Are you listening to me? Get out of here, go make dinner, and afterward..." He smiled in a way that made me freeze inside. "Afterward, we'll have our special moment, right?" It was that smile, that dirty, drunk smile, that promise of another night of terror. That's what made my hand move. A quick, decisive movement. My small hand against the large red button. The sound of the saw coming to life was deafening in the small space. The roar of the blade spinning at high speed. And then, another sound. A sound I will never forget as long as I live. His scream. It wasn't a scream of anger. It wasn't like the screams I was used to hearing when he was drunk and furious. It was a scream of pure pain, of shock, of disbelief. A scream that started deep and ended in a high-pitched squeal that didn't seem human. I pressed the emergency button almost immediately, turning off the saw. The silence that followed was more frightening than the scream. And then, the sound of something dripping on the wooden floor. Drip, 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 like rain on a tin roof. But it wasn't rain. At that moment, something strange happened to me. It was as if I watched the scene from outside my body. I saw when I ran to him, who had fallen to his knees, holding his wrists against his chest. I saw when I screamed for help. I saw when the neighbors came running, when someone called the ambulance, when they took me away, saying, "The poor little thing saw everything, take her away from here." And the whole time, a voice inside my head calmly repeated, "It's over. Finally over." The days following the accident passed like in a feverish dream. I remember being at the hospital, sitting on a hard bench in the hallway, while people came and went without noticing me. I remember the smell of disinfectant, the distant sound of voices and medical equipment. A social worker asked me questions, but I could barely answer. "It was an accident," I repeated, as if I had memorized the phrase. "He was drunk. He always left the safety key on." I don't know how long I stayed there. Hours, maybe. Until a nurse came to me and said that my father was stabilized, but that he had suffered serious injuries. The saw blade had deeply cut both wrists and hands, damaging tendons, muscles, bones. He would need several surgeries, and even then, he would never have complete movement of his hands again. "He's asking for you," said the nurse. "Do you want to see him?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to run from there, to flee as far as possible. Another part wanted to see with my own eyes that those hands, those terrible hands, were finally neutralized. "Yes," I answered after a moment. He was lying on a white bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen him. His arms were elevated on pillows, wrapped in thick white bandages stained with red. His face was pale, his eyes half closed, but when he saw me, they opened completely. "Hannah," he murmured, his voice hoarse. I approached slowly, like one approaches a wounded animal that can still be dangerous. I stopped at the foot of the bed, keeping my distance. "The doctor said I might never be able to work with carpentry again," he said, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. "My hands, they'll never be the same." I didn't answer. What could I say? That I was sorry? It would be a lie. At that moment, I felt absolutely nothing for him. "Did you see what happened?" he asked, looking at me again. There was a shadow of suspicion in his eyes, as if trying to remember exactly the sequence of events before the accident. "I saw," I answered simply. "The safety key was on." As always. We were silent for a long moment. Perhaps he saw something in my eyes, some trace of what had really happened. Or perhaps it was just the guilt that all alcoholics carry, that constant feeling that they did something terrible they can't remember. Either way, he looked away first. "I called your brother," said the social worker when I left the room. "We managed to locate him in Philadelphia. He's coming here. He'll arrive early tomorrow." Those words lit a small flame of hope inside me. Ted was coming back. I wouldn't be alone anymore. I spent the night at Mrs. Isaacs's house, our neighbor. I couldn't sleep, thinking about what I would say to Ted when I saw him. Would I tell the truth? The whole truth? Or would I keep that last secret just for myself? When the sun rose, I was already up, anxiously waiting. Around 9 in the morning, a car stopped in front of Mrs. Isaac's house. The door opened, and there he was. My brother, my protector. He looked older, thinner, more serious. But when he saw me, his face lit up with the same smile as always. I ran to his arms and fell apart. All the control, all the coldness I had maintained during those days dissolved in a torrent of tears. He hugged me tightly, as if wanting to make up for all the time we were separated. "I should have taken you with me," he whispered, his voice choked. "Forgive me, Hannah. Forgive me for leaving you alone with him." "You came back," I managed to say between sobs. "That's all that matters." Ted went to see our father at the hospital. I waited in the car, unable to enter that building again. When he returned, his face was serious, his lips compressed into a thin line. "He's not coming back home for a good while," he said, starting the car. "And when he returns, we won't be there." "What do you mean?" "I'm taking you with me to Philadelphia. Today. I already have a steady job at a factory, a rented room. It's not much, but it's far from him. And when he's discharged, he'll need care. The doctors have already said they'll admit him to a rehab clinic for alcoholics after the hospital. It seems Uncle Jeremy will help with that." It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I breathed without that constant feeling of fear and oppression. I was free. Finally, free. "Are you sure we can just go?" I asked, still incredulous. "The social worker has already authorized it. I'm your brother. I'm already 16 years old. I have a steady job. With the state he's in, no one will question that you stay with me. And if they try to send you back or to some shelter, we'll run away. I swear, Hannah, I'll never let anyone hurt you again." We returned to our house to get a few things. It was strange to be there without his threatening presence. I entered my old room, looked at the window overlooking the yard, at the walls with faded flowery wallpaper. I took some clothes, a photo of our mother, the money I had hidden. I didn't want anything else from that place. The workshop was locked with a padlock, a yellow police tape across the door. "Accident scene," it said. I looked one last time at that place where my life had changed forever and felt no remorse at all, just relief. The trip to Philadelphia was long. We took a bus that left at noon and only arrived at night. I looked out the window, watching the landscape change, the small towns giving way to open fields, and then the fields yielding to taller and taller buildings as we approached the big city. "It's big, isn't it?" said Ted, noticing my amazement when we finally arrived. "I was scared the first time too, but you'll get used to it, and here no one knows us. We can start over." The room Ted rented was in a boarding house in the Fishtown neighborhood, near the factory where he worked. It was small, with just a single bed, a small table, and a closet. "I'll sleep on the floor," he said, putting down a mat he had borrowed. "Tomorrow I'll start looking for a bigger place for us." That first night in Philadelphia, lying in bed while Ted slept on the floor, I stared at the unfamiliar ceiling, listening to the strange sounds of the big city. Cars, honks, distant voices. So different from the oppressive silence of the nights in Millfield. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of the darkness. The following months were of adaptation. Ted continued working at the furniture factory, using the skill he had learned from our father for something positive. I started studying at a public school near the boarding house. At first, it was difficult. I hardly spoke. I was afraid of everyone. I got scared when someone raised their voice or made a sudden movement near me. But gradually, very slowly, I began to open up. I made a friend, Samantha, a girl with thick glasses who was also new to the school and as shy as I was. I started getting good grades, participating more in classes. The English teacher, Mrs. Rita, said I had a talent for writing, that I should develop it. Ted found a small apartment for us to rent in the Port Richmond neighborhood. Just one bedroom, a tiny living room and a kitchen, but it was ours. Our safe space, away from him. Sometimes I received news about our father through Uncle Jeremy, who called from time to time. I learned that he had left the hospital after 3 months, that he had lost much of the mobility in his hands, that he could never work as a carpenter again, that he was in the rehab clinic trying to quit drinking, that he asked about us. I listened to everything in silence, without reaction. One day, almost a year after the accident, Ted brought me a letter from him. "You don't have to read it if you don't want to," said my brother. But I thought I should give it to you. I held the letter in my hand for hours, without the courage to open it. When I finally did, I found a trembling and irregular handwriting, the handwriting of someone who can barely hold a pen. It was a request for forgiveness. Long, confused, full of justifications about the alcohol, about the pain of losing our mother, about how he wasn't in his right mind. He said that in the clinic he had understood the harm he had done, that he would never drink again, that he wanted to see us, that we could be a family again. At the end, he wrote, "I know that what I did is unforgivable, but I need to say this, that accident. I remember you there. I remember your look. And as terrible as it was, I think it saved our lives. You had the courage I didn't have to break that cycle." I tore the letter into small pieces and threw it in the trash. I didn't need his forgiveness. I didn't need him to acknowledge what had really happened in the workshop that day. I didn't need anything more from him. My life now was in Philadelphia, with Ted, with the possibility of a different future, a future where I wouldn't need to feel afraid of anyone's hands. That's how, at 14 years old, I began my real life. It wasn't easy. There were nightmares, anxiety attacks, moments when something as simple as the smell of alcohol or the sound of a saw would make me panic. But there was also Ted, always by my side. There was Samantha and her unconditional friendship, even without knowing my whole story. There was Mrs. Rita, encouraging my writing, showing me that I could transform pain into something beautiful through words. And there was myself, stronger than I ever imagined I could be. A survivor. Someone who had the courage to do what needed to be done to free herself. Today, at 73 years old, sitting on my porch in Burlington, Vermont, I see how much life can change. Who would have thought that that frightened girl from Millfield would one day be here, serene, surrounded by love and peace? The path was long. I came to live here because of love. I met my August when I was 23 years old. He worked as an accountant in the same factory where Ted was still employed. It was Ted who introduced us at a year-end company party. August was 10 years older than me, already established in life, with a calmness and patience that won me over little by little. At first, it was difficult. I still carried the scars of the past, still was afraid of men, still woke up screaming in the middle of the night. But August never gave up on me. He waited, patient as only he knew how to be. When I finally told him my whole story, he just held my hands and said, "You're the strongest person I've ever met." We got married in 1975, me at 25 and him at 35. It was a small ceremony, just with the closest friends. Ted was my best man. He was already married to Ivy, whom he met in college. Yes, my brother managed to study, became an engineer. He was always the smart one in the family. Today they live in Portland, Oregon, and have 2 grown children. We talk every week on the phone. August was from Burlington and brought me here after the wedding. I fell in love with this city from the first day. There's something in the atmosphere here, in the way people are, that made me feel at home in a way I had never felt before. We bought our little house, small but comfortable, with a garden in the back where August planted a bit of everything. I worked as a secretary at a school for many years, while August continued in accounting. We didn't have children right away. The doctor said that the trauma I experienced in adolescence had left marks on my body as well, besides those I carried in my soul. But after 7 years of trying, our Martha was born, bringing a joy I didn't even imagine was possible. Martha was a blessing from her first cry, a healthy, strong girl, with her father's eyes, and they say, my smile. I raised her with all the love I didn't have at the same age, protected her like a lioness. Sometimes August would say I was too overprotective, but how could it be different? I knew what the world was capable of. My August passed away 12 years ago, a sudden heart attack. He was in the garden, tending to the roses he loved so much, when he simply fell. It was hard, very hard. But I had our Martha. I had our granddaughter Claire, who at the time was only 5 years old. I had a life built with so much effort to go on. Claire, my darling. Today she's already 17 years old, imagine, a beautiful, intelligent girl, full of dreams. It was she who encouraged me to start these videos, saying that my stories could help other people. At first I thought it was crazy, but she insisted so much that I ended up giving in. Grandma, you survived so much. Your story needs to be told, she would say. And it seems she was right, from the affection I receive from you with each video. My routine today is peaceful. I wake up early, make my tea, take care of my plants. 3 times a week I go to the church craft group, where I knit and crochet for donation. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I volunteer teaching literacy to adults at the community center. It's my way of giving back what Mrs. Rita did for me so many years ago, showing me that words can heal. Martha comes to visit me often. She lives just 20 minutes from here. Claire, well, she shows up almost every day after school. She sits here with me on the porch, tells me the news, teaches me to use this complicated cell phone, laughs at my difficulty with technology. As for my father, he died many years ago in the rehab clinic. I never saw him again after that day in the hospital. I learned from Ted that he never drank again after the accident, that he became a quiet and repentant man, that his hands never fully recovered. They became like immobile claws, unable to even hold a glass properly. For a long time, I carried the weight of what I did in that workshop. It wasn't regret, it was more a kind of silent guilt that accompanied me. Ted was the only one who knew the complete truth, and he never judged me. You did what needed to be done, he would say, when the subject came up. He destroyed our childhood. You ensured our future. With time, I learned to forgive myself. It wasn't easy. It took years of therapy. Yes, when I finally had the means, I sought professional help. Doctor. Nancy, my psychologist for more than a decade, helped me understand that 13-year-old girl was fighting for her life in the only way she could. Today, when I look back, I see not just the pain and horror of those years, but also the strength I discovered within myself, the ability to survive, to rebuild, to love despite everything. My house now is my refuge. Every corner has a bit of my history. The rocking chair that August gave me on our 30th wedding anniversary. The family photos on the walls, Martha as a child in her father's arms, Claire on her first day of school, Ted and I as adults, arm in arm, sincere smiles after so much struggle. The colorful crochet pieces I make, spread over the furniture. The garden I keep blooming all year round, even in winter. This is the life I built from the ashes of a past that tried to destroy me. A simple life, but full of meaning. A life where the hands that touch me only bring true affection, where night is no longer a source of terror, but of deserved rest. And that's what I'm most proud of. Not just having survived, but having learned to live fully, despite everything. My dears who have followed me this far, sharing this story wasn't easy. For many years, I kept this secret so deeply that I almost convinced myself it had happened to someone else, not to me. But I learned that silence only protects those who hurt, never those who were hurt. If you're going through something similar, or know someone who is, I want you to know, you're not alone. What happens behind closed doors, in the darkness of night, is not your fault. It never was. The shame doesn't belong to you, but to those who abused your trust, your body, your innocence. It took me decades to understand that girl from Millfield had no choice. That when the hands that should protect become the hands that hurt, something breaks inside us. A break so deep it seems impossible to repair. But it's not. Healing comes with time, with true love, with help. It comes when we find people who value us for who we are, not for what they can take from us. It comes when we learn to trust again, even thinking we would never be capable of it. In any country, in any culture, there are resources to help. Seek local authorities, protection organizations. Don't be afraid to speak. Your voice is stronger than you imagine. When I finally told my complete story to my psychologist, it was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders. We don't need to carry alone that which we didn't create. The hands that once hurt me could never touch anyone again. But my hands, oh, my hands had such a different destiny. With them, I rocked my daughter, caressed my granddaughter, hugged my husband, planted flowers, created beauty with crochet, wrote stories, held the hands of others who needed support. My hands built a new life from the ashes of the old one. You can too. No matter how dark the night is, dawn always comes. No matter how deep the well is, there's always a rope to climb. No matter how many times they told you that you're worth nothing, that was always a lie. When I look at the wrinkles on my hands today, I see a map of the battles I won, of the joys I conquered, of the love I gave and received. They are hands that knew the worst of humanity, but also the best. They are hands that survived, just like me. And you, my dear, who is listening to me now, I need you to do something very important. I need you to subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to receive all our stories of overcoming. These stories can save lives, can show someone who is suffering in silence that there is a way out. Each subscription is like an extended hand for someone who needs hope. And in the comments, leave the word "survived" if you watched until here. It's a powerful word, isn't it? A word I carry with pride, and that perhaps you carry too. A word that unites us, that shows we are stronger than what tried to destroy us. Do this now. Don't wait even one more minute. Your action can be the light that someone is looking for in the darkness. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for allowing me to transform my pain into something that can help. That is true healing, when our personal story becomes a bridge to the healing of others. Until the next video, my dears, God bless each one of you.